Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for joining us during our Client Appreciation Week. For those that don't know me, I'm Matt Howard, our HR supervisor here at Dominion Payroll. I'm currently coming up on my second year here at Dominion Payroll, and I come with a background focused on recruitment and human resources. Before we begin today, I do want to give a quick reminder that today's session is being recorded, and a copy of the recording will be sent following our presentation. If you have any questions that come up, please place them in our questions chat and we'll address them at the end. We have a fantastic lineup of topics planned for you today during our Navigating the Future of Work webinar, including managing a diverse workforce, fostering employee development, and exploring the latest trends in employee benefits and wellness. Before we dive in, I have the pleasure of introducing our three expert guests who will guide us through these key areas. First up, we have Cindy Bolan, the Director of HR at ComSonics. Cindy has a wealth of experience across various industries, and her passion for training, recruitment, and data-driven HR strategies shines through in all her work. Cindy also contributes to her community as an executive board member for the Shenandoah Valley Workforce Development Board and serves as chair of the HR committee for the Boys and Girls Club of Harrisonburg. Next, we're thrilled to welcome Kristin Wasilewski. Kristin brings a unique perspective to HR, having transitioned from 8 years of service in the U.S. Army to a distinguished HR career. She specializes in performance management and benefits administration, with a particular interest in the link between benefits and employee mental health. Kristin is a certified fitness and yoga instructor and leverages her background in wellness to promote healthy, balanced lifestyles for employees. And then finally, we have David Garza, a U.S. Army veteran and the founder and CEO of Compass Human Capital Advisors. David's focus is on helping small to mid-sized businesses optimize HR policies and build strong teams. He has extensive expertise in leadership development, talent acquisition, and performance management. So please join me in welcoming Cindy, Kristin, and David as we kick off this valuable discussion today. Now let's dive in and get things started here. So today we'll be exploring 6 dynamic topics in a series of engaging questions. We'll cover the evolving future of work, effective management strategies across different work environments, whether that be remote, hybrid, or in person, the challenges of a shrinking workforce, employee development through upskilling and reskilling, current trends in employee benefits and wellness, and the rising importance of corporate social responsibility, or CSR. To kick things off, we'll start with the future of work. David, our first question is for you. What are the key trends, or what key trends do you believe will shape the workplace of the future, and how is your HR team preparing for those?
Thank you, Matt, and thank you to Dominion Payroll for the opportunity to speak today. And I appreciate the topics that we're going to talk about because they're very relevant. First and foremost, there are 2 things that I continue to talk to my clients. And just to let the audience know, I worked at corporate HR for 25 years, last 15 as a VP of HR, but now I consult with small mid-market business owners. So my perspective is coming from that marketplace where there are smaller organizations. The 2 things that are really having an influence on those 2 or that small mid-market business space is, 1, the shrinking U.S. workforce population. I'm speaking from a macro level. For those who may not be familiar with the issue, we are not having babies like we used to in this country. And so our workforce is slowly starting to decline with more baby boomers retiring. We just don't have the numbers that are coming into the workforce that we have become accustomed to for the last several part of the decades in the late 20th century and the first part of the 21st century. And so we're going to have to figure out how are we going to address the fact that we're just not going to have as much talent available to us. And that poses a thought about recent debate around immigration. I'll elaborate later on some of the questions, but I do think that without having more people work later in their lives or an increase in population, we're going to have to figure out a way to embrace immigration because we're going to need individuals to come and fill the job roles that aren't being filled today because of the lack of a workforce. And then the second trend I think is going to be shaping us is technology and AI. I'm not, obviously, I'm an HR, I'm not a technology person, but there are growing influences in employment. I can't speculate on how that's going to impact the nature of work, but with the shrinking workforce, I do think they're probably going to have a much sooner solution that may impact that problem than we can anticipate. So it's kind of a wait and see. But those are the two trends: the shrinking workforce and also technology in the workplace.
That's that's absolutely great insight there, and as we all know, AI is kind of taken over, so we definitely expect that to be coming in the pipeline here. But kind of going off of that, Kristin, I got another one for you. What are some of forward-thinking approaches that HR leaders can take on to future-proof their workforce and organization?
Great. Thanks, Matt. And thanks, David, for kicking us off in this section. So I believe it's vital in the workforce and organization that HR and senior leaders are consistently seeking out this training and learning, such as webinars, podcasts, in-person conferences. We are in a world that's ever evolving, and we've always been in a world that's evolving, but it's a little bit faster. And David touched on that with AI, with technology. People have information at their fingertips, and the change is just so quick. And I think that leaders, owners, and HR professionals need to be ready for that change and ready to implement it in their organization. The Gen Z is the future of the workplace. I think what's going to happen here in the shrinking workplace is we're going to see Gen Z put in roles that many may have thought before they are not ready for yet. Okay, because the baby boomers are going to be retiring. And with that retirement, we're losing a wealth of information. The baby boomers tended to stay in these positions for sometimes decades at a time. And so, what I think is going to be a great future proof is getting and retaining those Gen Z employees and having them work alongside your senior leadership, getting the wealth of information into the minds of the Gen Z, and also learning from Gen Z. What do y'all want in your workforce? What is it that you're looking for to stay here? And it's going to be a lot of collaboration between those two demographics. And that's how we're going to see the future proof of the workforce and the organizations.
I love that, and definitely need to pass down that knowledge. I love that. To kind of go right back to piggyback off of that, David, what role do you think that HR should play in the shaping of this future of work, or both in terms of policy but also practice?
Yeah, I honestly think we look at technology, but we also have to appreciate what's going on in the world today, particularly here with the election. There's going to be some shifting laws and regulations, and the role that HR has to play is to keep abreast of that as well, not only on the technology front, but what's going to be happening from a regulation standpoint. And face it, we've got a very emboldened electorate, and so there's going to be some social change that will impact our workplace. I mentioned immigration. I know right now there's a tendency to think that it's bad for the economy, but there's a lot of industries that rely on immigration. So we're going to have to be in the forefront of that as HR leaders and determining how do we offset if we do lose some of the workforce. How do we offset that if we don't have the workforce population, if we don't have the immigration? How do we get technology? How do we leverage that to help us shore up those gaps until we settle into a new norm? We've also had some issues in shaping the future of the workforce with what we do in the area of retention, and particularly around benefits. And again, I'm not trying to be political. I don't know where you sit on either side of the issues, but there looks like there's regulation changes coming. There might be some changes in how our benefits work that may swing us back to a different direction, and we may be impacted by that. Some of our workers out there may be shopping jobs because of benefits, and there's a likelihood that we may find ourselves losing some employees but gaining some employees. So all that being said, we've got to stay in front of these shifting laws and regulations. It always happens. When the change of an administration happens, we've always got to anticipate there to be change. There will be changes in the NLRB as we can anticipate. So, our role to play here is to keep in the forefront of those changes that are coming and be able to advise our business leaders where the issues are and where the opportunities are as well.
Perfect. And I think when people think future of work, they also think of flexibility. I think that's a hot topic in today's times. And I know we're about to get into that here in a second, but I think this is a great last question before we get over to that topic. And David, how has your organization adapted to that increased emphasis on flexibility and employee autonomy there in the post-pandemic workplace?
That's great, Matt. Great question, Matt. And again, I'll remind y'all that I work with different companies, some that are more prone to having more flexibility and employee autonomy. And when I define employee autonomy, I'm thinking about employees who can work in an unsupervised work environment. So a lot of my clients have been following the lead of larger corporations. But what I try to advise them on is, as you're considering this increased flexibility and employee autonomy opportunities in this post-pandemic workplace, consider the role itself with regard to three areas from an employer standpoint: the confidentiality of the role, the security that's necessary for the role, and then the nature of work. As we're making choices and decisions on remote and hybrid work, we have to protect the interests of the company first. And that's the confidentiality and security question. But once you check the boxes on that, then it comes down to the nature of work. Um, is it a job that can lend itself more to that flexibility and that autonomy of employees working in an unsupervised environment remotely? And there's no, talked to a client just the other day, we've proven to ourselves it works in some companies. People went home and the companies still continue to be on pace with what they were doing before the pandemic. So we've proven we can do it. But outside an employer making those decisions, there's no getting around the fact that being present in the presence of your leaders and the organization, there's an advantage to doing that. And the thing that I'm encouraging employers not to forget is that remote and hybrid employees also are present. They just may not be physically present, but we need to make sure we make them more visible and notable. And we need to look at that through their outcomes, their results, and impact. So my advice from an HR person to employees: if you're out there in a flexible and autonomous work environment, you're going to have to make yourselves more valuable to the organization by being more available, performing above expectations to offset that lack of visibility and notoriety. But those are things that I'm advising clients, but also employees as we look at this greater flexibility and autonomy.
Love that. Love that. And right just before we switch off topics, I do want to give Cindy and Kristin any chance to jump in there. Totally fine if not, but just didn't know if you wanted to speak on anything else regarding the future of work before we move on.
Yeah, I would add, I think that learning and development is huge to kind of get yourself in the right space to retain the people that you need. Also, when you look at it, generationally, they say Gen Z, that's what they want. But I would counter and say, I think that's what any generation wants. Let me learn, let me grow, let me develop, let me increase my pay. Those are pretty common things, but sometimes we get so busy in the day-to-day that we lose focus on what our employees want and what will really help us as an organization going forward. So I think learning and development is going to be huge.
Absolutely.
Can't agree more.
I would like to add in there, along with learning and development, succession planning and training.
Mhm.
I know that in larger corporations, this is something that's focused on, but sometimes in small and mid-sized companies, you have someone in a position that holds a lot of knowledge. And once that person leaves the organization, you might have 2 or 3 people trying to figure it out. So right now is the time to find those people, find those key players, and create your succession planning, create your training plans so that you're ready to move, so that the organization doesn't stop. Everything moves smoothly, even when you start to lose top talent.
And those
That's
are hard
fantastic.
lessons. Those are hard lessons to learn, Kristin. When you're single threaded in a position and all of a sudden they give their notice, you're scrambling.
Yep.
So, at our organization, we recently had that happen and we said, no more. We learned the hard way. So Don't be like us. Don't learn the hard way.
Sometimes that's needed, but definitely can agree with all of you there in succession planning and learning development there as well. Going on to our next topic here, managing hybrid, remote, in-person workers. We definitely have a diverse work environment across the board now. And so I want to get an idea from you, David, on how do you maintain a strong corporate culture and connection amongst employees given that hybrid work environment, or just kind of the diversity behind those work environments?
That's a great question, Matt. In fact, I was working about 10 years prior to the pandemic with a remote portion of our workforce and trying to ensure we kept them connected with the company and also keeping the culture going. And here's what I believe. It's whether you're on-site, hybrid, or remote. I think there are three employee imperatives, three employee musts that an employer must strive to meet. And that is number one, meaning and purpose. Number two, hope. And number three, relevance. I look at culture from the ground up rather than down. And when we talk about meaning and purpose, that's just ensuring your employees are aligned with what the organization's vision, purpose, values, and strategy are, making sure that they have a reason for the work that they're doing. Otherwise, in any organization, whether you're on site, hybrid, or remote, you're lost if you don't feel like you're tied into something important. That's the first imperative. Number two is hope. And all of us, we all have hope that tomorrow is going to be better than today. Employees want to believe that what they're doing today is going to lead to a reward tomorrow, either a promotion or either a pay increase. But we as employers, as HR leaders, have to ensure we have the systems and processes in place that demonstrate that there is hope, that the employees are putting their effort into something that's going to lead to a better tomorrow. And we also want hope that the company is going to be around tomorrow, that it's being well run and the doors aren't going to be shuttered. So there's a lot of responsibility from a leadership standpoint. And then number three, relevance. This ticked in my head a couple of years back when I noticed that my teenagers and my elderly parents were both trying to be relevant. Teenagers fight for wanting to be respected as an adult, and the elderly want to be remembered and not forgotten. And that's a human nature thing. I see that with hybrid employees, with on-site employees, remote employees. We all want to be regarded. We don't want to be ignored. We don't want to be forgotten. So even more so, we want to be heard. We want our ideas and suggestions to be heard. We want to have input on how the company can succeed. So it's my belief that a strong culture can be maintained if we as an employer, as an HR department, can think through how we can make sure our employees have meaning, make sure we're giving them hope, but also keep them relevant to what the business is doing.
And I am curious, just based off of the performance management side of things as well, like what challenges have you faced in managing that performance for remote workers versus in-person teams, and how have you addressed those?
Back at me there, Matt?
Yeah, sorry, back at you, David. Apologies.
Yeah. I actually think it's not much different. And if you weren't managing performance well on site, it's not going to be any better on a remote standpoint. So the advice I give to my clients in either role is to make sure that they are, or they have a process and a management program that holds people accountable to specific goals. What we do, or what I have advised to clients, is that for both on-site and off-site employees, you have to establish performance periods. These are blocks of times, either monthly, quarterly, and within those, set those goals and expectations. I'm sure all of us as HR professionals are doing that. But employees, whether they're remote, hybrid, or on-site, need to know what's expected of them, what's the finish line, and then they also have to be very much aligned with what we want them to do. That's half the battle. But the other part of the battle, and I find this more so with smaller organizations, is that sometimes our individuals and teams don't understand their roles. So we've got to make sure that individuals understand what they're responsible for doing in their job, but also what their responsibility is for the team. And the team also has to understand what they're supposed to accomplish. And to do so, we have to make sure the employees have the right capabilities, the right experience. There's nothing worse than being an individual on a team and not knowing what you're supposed to be doing or how you're supposed to be doing it. So that's number two. And then finally, we've got to set them up for success. Too often do I see clients who hire people, give them the job description, and then just set them off, and they've done nothing to enable them to succeed. And that's simply having the correct materials, correct equipment, correct processes, an environment to succeed. And then for those who are working from home as an employer, making sure that they do have a good environment so that they can succeed at home. And that is a workspace that's going to be free from distraction, that they have the technology they need to do the job, and that they're able to do their work in a very successful way. So, those are tools or practices that we've looked at trying to manage performance for our offsite, remote, and hybrid workers.
That's fantastic. And I think effective communication as well can kind of just go on with that as well for not only in-person hybrid, but also fully remote. As long as you're communicating effectively, everyone's on the same page, can go forward from there. I'm going to go into our next topic here of the shrinking workforce, which I know we've kind of touched on already of that kind of being a problem in the future. But I'm going to start off with Cindy here. With the current trends and demographic shifts in the shrinking workforce, how is your organization adjusting its talent acquisition and retention strategies?
Okay. So let me set the stage for you a little bit before I get into that so you know context. Our average employee age is 50 years old. Plus 56% of our employees have 5 or more years of service. So sounds like on the surface we're living the dream, right? However, if you look at BLS data, the average employee age in the US is 42.3 years. So we're skewing older. And if we compare the BLS information about employee tenure, the median number of years of all workers have been with their current company is, as of January of this year, is 6.9 years, and our average length of service is 11 years. But what we found, so we're not really living the dream, because what we found over the past 4 years, as we kind of started to dig into the data and the details, is we found that our retention rates for new hires is decreasing year over year. One of our key pulse points is to track how many employees make it to their 1-year anniversary. And we've seen year over year declines in that number, which definitely caught my attention, because we spend a lot of time and effort bringing people in. And, 1 year mark's kind of a good mark to say, okay, we've probably recouped our training investment. Now we're really getting good productivity from the employee, but they're falling out before they get there. So what are we doing about it? From acquisition retention perspective, kind of 3 main things. First of all, we educate. Every month I am in our executive team meeting talking about this information, explaining the current environment, providing data to back up my statements. So if you would talk to any of our executives, they know what's going on. They're well informed, and we're focused on tracking things like retention rates, looking at our exits for correlation between why they left and any other information related to that, which could be what does it look like by age? What does it look like by pay rate? What does it look like by length of service? We're constantly looking for what could be causing this, or how could we use this information to develop countermeasures to manage it better. Secondly, the information really sets the stage for change for us. One of the things that we did in the past year was we increased our starting pay rate for our production positions, and it all came about because of looking at the data, looking at the trends, and putting it together and developing an action plan. So if we come at it with data, we can affect change. If we kind of come at it by I thinks and maybes, it's a harder case to make. Second thing we're doing is doing some recalibration of expectations. As you can imagine, when your average length of service is 11 years, supervisors, when hiring managers, when they're looking at new candidates for a position, they want someone who's going to stay 20 years would be good. And that's not the world we're living in anymore. So we really continually work to recalibrate so that hiring managers really give candidates who have the skills and abilities a fair shot at the position. We dig into, in our interviews, because HR participates in the interviews, we dig into reasons for short employment spans. And, from a learning and development standpoint, if they're not being fulfilled in the job, they're going to look for a job that will. And is that really a reason not to hire someone who wants to grow and learn and add value? So we really try to push back on some assumptions that might be made and really get to it. And we share information like, average length of employment is not 11 years. So if we can get somebody for 3 years and they do great things for us, what does that look like for us as a company in the long run? So it's a lot of communication and just trying to logically go through some of the concerns or arguments that you might get. Also, we have job ladders for most of our hourly positions, which allow employees to move into higher pay grades as they develop skills and take on more responsibilities. And that's a great tool for us to use. And the supervisors are empowered. When somebody's ready, they can be promoted. And as part of their promotion, they get a wage increase. But our supervisors like to be super efficient. So they like to stack those things. So when they're doing their annual performance review, they promote them at the same time. So they give them their annual merit increase, and then they throw a promotional increase on top of it. And I basically said, time out. We don't need to throw money. We need to celebrate promotions in and of themselves. And if we do that off cycle from the merit review process, we've just created more engagement with our employees. Because, I'm not going to turn down, a 15% pay increase, but if you space it out and maybe give me 7.5 each time, I'll remember that probably better than 15% all at once. So there's some strategy with how we do that. So we've really worked with trying to get away from efficiency in that aspect and more about let's reward and recognize and make it last. Also, within the past year, HR does periodic check-ins in the first 6 months of employment. So we're just trying to gather feedback and look for trends. When we do that, we're asking questions like whether they feel welcome. We ask that at the end of their first week. Have you felt welcome in the job? Did somebody show you where the restrooms were? And, just the basic things. I mean, you think about it, when an employee starts their first day, what do they want to know? Where's the restroom? What time's lunch? When do I get my first paycheck? And I don't know, you fill in the rest. It's pretty basic stuff that people want on their first day. So we try to really engineer that in and make sure it happens, because if they're worried about those pieces, they can't really concentrate on learning about the company and the organization and their role in it. We ask in their second set of questions, we ask whether they've made a friend at work, someone they can talk to, because that's important too. We're an employee-owned company, so we're a little bit different in that all of our employees are owners, and we really want them to feel like owners and feel a part of the bigger team. So we check on those things. And then also if we see some troubles, because sometimes you pick up a little vibe of they don't know whether this is a good thing for them or not, then usually there's a phone call to the supervisor saying, when's the last time you checked in with so-and-so? You might ask them about this, that, or the other. And it's all about trying to figure out how to keep them and retain them. And then finally, we ask questions early on about the recruiting process, because I want to know how my team's doing. and whether we are getting through quickly enough. Did we leave them hanging for a week or two with no feedback? All of those things play into, people's decisions on where they want to be, what they want to be a part of.
100%, and I like that you're doing that so quickly from their start date as well. You can find out a lot about candidates and employees in that first 30 days, and so doing that really quickly is great. David, I am going to give you a chance if you want to have any thoughts to add there in terms of how you view that.
Yeah, and Cindy, kudos to you. You're doing it right. I think you're addressing all the needs. But I'll also advise, though, we're not doing business like we used to do. We've got to change the mindset of our leaders in the organization. Talent acquisition and retention is not an exception to our work. It is our work.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just an HR job. It's all of our jobs. And it has to be written into the job duties of our leaders and managers in an organization. Talent acquisition and retention is something you have to be responsible for. And we've got to get buy-in from the top for that. The only other things that I'll echo with what Cindy said, we have to be more selective. The smaller middle market organizations still think there's a pipeline of talent out there, and there's not. So we've got to be smart in our hiring, make sure we get the right people who are motivated to work at our companies. And obviously there's a lot of tools that Cindy talked about in terms of how they do that. And there's probably some great things that you're doing out there to do that. And then second is the focus on retention. And retention isn't just pizza parties and company happy hours and swag. I go back to those three imperatives. It's making sure people have some meaning, some hope, and some relevance. And that's manifested through this work-life flexibility, training that you do for them, fair compensation practices. I shudder when I hear companies out there just giving 3% across the board. And the only outcome there is that the good employees are angry that the bad employees got the same amount of increase. So we've got to be smart when we think about retention, that the things we do impact how people think about the job, and we got to have effective leaders. We have got to train our leaders to make retention a responsibility and also a priority as well. But kudos to Cindy for the work that they're doing there.
That's great. Awesome. Kristin, I got one for you now. What are your thoughts on the long-term economic and organizational impact of the shrinking workforce? And how do you think HR professionals should prepare for that?
Well, I do think that HR professionals should be preparing by, again, making changes and making changes in connection with who is going to be in the workforce during that time. So a lot of things I'm passionate about are looking ahead from 5 to 10 years from now to see what the workforce is going to look like and what that workforce is going to need. And it's drastically different than what the workforce looks like now or even looked like 10 and 20 years ago. And David touched on some great areas earlier about the flexibility, the hybrid, the remote opportunities. That's kind of like where we're going with this. And we also need to make sure that we're listening to, again, our Gen Z, our millennials on what it is to work and what it is to get the most out of their productivity. So in conversations and podcasts that I've listened to, the Gen Z, it's not that they don't want to work, but it's that they have more strict boundaries than people in the past. They have hobbies, they have outside activities that they want to do. And so they're not willing to always work past like the 5:30 p.m. or get the phone calls at 6 a.m. And I've been seeing that in the organizations that I work for. And I feel it personally, right? It's sitting in one of those demographics. And I think that this is not a negative thing. It's not about work. They don't want to work hard. It's that they don't want to work long. And I think that we as HR professionals need to find a way to find a balance from senior leaders, owners, shareholders, and these employees on what that looks like, okay? Because, it could look like easily, oh, they just don't want to work hard anymore, that they want to do these other things. But I believe it's a little bit different because I think that we can get some absolute great performance out of these individuals if we set parameters that work for them in coming into the workforce.
I love that. And I think if that is where it's heading and that's where we're thinking it's heading, we definitely want to make those changes now and get prepared for that. So that way we're not behind and we're being ahead of the game there. So definitely love that. David, I got one last question for you on this topic. And It's how are you addressing skill shortages and ensuring your company remains competitive in that tightening labor market?
That's a great question too, and I'm sure there's a lot of strategies that are being employed out there. I read an article a couple of years ago about how Walmart was addressing skill shortages, and they're doing what seems obvious, and that's cross training and getting their employees trained up on different job roles that they have within their organization. One of my clients is a franchise fast casual food company. They own 5 franchises, and they're doing the same, teaching people how to be at the front counter, at the drive-through window, in the back of the kitchen preparing meals. So I think with shortages in skills, or really shortages in talent, it's going to be important for organizations to figure out how to make the most out of the talent they have and give that task variety to their employees. I think that actually helps with retention too, because people don't get stale in their job doing the same thing. Now that's more Walmart, fast food. That's more on your front line. When you get into higher roles, how you're addressing skill shortages is essentially how much do we want to invest in getting people educated, getting them the right talent, and so there's budgets that we can do for learning and development within our company, but we also have to start considering when does it make sense for us as organizations to invest in people going out and getting a certification, going out and maybe getting an education. So there's going to be a need to cultivate our talent that we have within us. There's not going to be that line at the door much anymore, where you can find that readily available candidate. We're going to have to make do with what we have, and I think those are some strategies that some of our partners, or at least some of our clients, are considering at this point.
Great answer. And I think that definitely puts us right in line with our next topic of employee development, upskilling and reskilling. And so, Cindy, I've got a question for you that's relatively similar. How are you addressing the skill shortages in your organization? And how are you ensuring your company remains competitive, again, in that tightening labor market?
Sure. So in addition to what I'd kind of talked about before, we're really working to shift our supervisors' focus to identify right skills for a position. If we can easily teach a skill, we don't need to be screening people out because they don't have that basic skill. So the focus of our recruiting conversations become really exploring the important entry skills for a position. And those entry skills can come in a variety of sources. So for instance, we do repair work on cable equipment. No, we're not going to fix the remote control for your TV, and no, we're not going to fix the box that all the channels come through. Think more outside, and those are electronic equipment. And for electronic repair work, we would love to have somebody come in with soldering skills because it's used. We repair printed circuit boards. We might remove components, replace components, fix components, all kinds of different things. But learning how to solder, when you look at what is important in learning how to solder, it is having attention to detail and steady hand. Okay. We talk to people, we ask them, what kind of things do you like to do? What kind of jobs have you had? But also anything that you like to do outside of work that might fit with what we're looking for. We had somebody once tell us, I love to make jewelry. Well, gee, attention to detail and fine motor skills, there it is. And, we can easily teach the soldering skills if they have those basic skill sets that we can build upon. In addition, if somebody says to us, oh, I love buying, gaming systems that don't work and I take it apart and I make them work again. Well, there's the job we need. That person has the right mindset, that curiosity and that ability to problem solve that we need. So, we really, because we know that we're not going to have a line of people out the door who have soldering skills for us, we really look for ways. And we have people that we send to outside training, to David's point, to be certified, to be a train the trainer on soldering skills. And they meet certain standards that are required in the work that we do. So, there's learning and development opportunities for the trainer. There's learning and development opportunities for the people that they're training. So it really checks a lot of boxes and provides a good experience for many people. We also have partnerships with local area schools to provide internships. So we're catching people who are in the community college system. We have relationships with the instructors, and if they call us up and say, hey, so-and-so would like to do an internship and I think that they'd be a really good fit for you, we're going to figure out a way to get them in on an internship with us. And then we have the opportunity to offer them a job if it truly is a good fit. And it helps because we kind of have an inside track that the instructor knows the quality of that student's work. We also partner with Woodrow Wilson Rehabilitation Center. They bring in students from around the Commonwealth to learn skills after accidents happen, things like that. And as part of their learning in the warehousing and manufacturing skill set areas, they treat them by letting them come take tours of local businesses. So we always open our doors and invite them to come in and explain about what we do. And then they also sometimes do internships, and we're willing and able to provide the internships and work through if there are special accommodation needs. We try our best to figure out a way to work through those. So those are just a couple examples of what we try to do.
That's fantastic. I love that. And David, I got another one for you. What strategies have you employ to foster continuous learning and development for employees across different work models specifically?
Yeah, Matt, and I go back to something Kristin was saying about the new generations and in terms of what they're doing. I'm amazed. I just want to make a comment aside here. I am impressed with how quickly the new generations are coming into the workforce and how much they know and how much they actually learn. I have a couple of sons that are part of that generation, and I'm amazed at the level of responsibilities that they have and the jobs that they've taken on. So as much as we may think about the new generations coming to work, much to what Kristin said, and I think Cindy said it as well, they still do want to work. It's just the amount of time. So some of the things that I've advised my clients on, and by the way, as a VP of HR, budgets for learning and development were always difficult to get. And when there were cuts to budgets, they were always the first one to get cut. Training was always the first budget to get cut. But one thing that I've asked my clients to lean into is what I call knowledge sharing. It's what I recommend. It's not new, but it's continuous learning and improvement. And where it can be applied, I encourage my clients to build it into their schedule. And what it is, I go back to the military, and Kristin, you probably know this. We used to do something called after action reviews. And that was a step-by-step, minute-by-minute review of what we just finished doing in a training exercise. What didn't work? What did work? What were the situations or circumstances and how we addressed them? And it comes from a position of learning and growth, not blaming or finger pointing. I had a client that I introduced it to two months ago, and they have gone gangbusters with it. They sit down with their employees. Now, they're an HVAC company, and they sit down with their employees and they go through why a project may have taken long. Let's go through and learn from it. And they learn things about their employees. A project went long because the head guy was teaching the younger guy how to do things right. So he's taking advantage of the time to teach. So we don't always have to sit there and think that we have to have a formal training or go to a class. We have the knowledge and experience in house, and we just need to sit down and review it with each other as a way to address it. My company, Compass Human Capital Advisors, we're really focused on helping middle management get better. Not just the management, but the processes and the tools. And we find that a lot of my clients, this is an area that they have a gap of how they employ different learning and development strategies. And it's quite simply right underneath their nose. It's just taking the time to learn from what your employees are doing and finding an avenue for them to share that and teach that to other people.
Fantastic. And Sydney, I know we already kind of touched a little bit on your internship program, but I do want to learn a little bit more about just how you create development pathways to cater not only to the junior employees, but also senior employees, and especially in that hybrid or remote workforce.
Yeah. And full disclosure, we don't have a lot of positions that are remote, and unfortunately, hybrid's going away at the first of the year, so I'll have to kind of pull that piece out of the equation. But it really, some of this is the nature of our business. You can't repair a power supply in your house. You're just not going to be able to make that work for you. The thing weighs 85 pounds and you really don't want it in your house. It's dirty. It's been outside. Who knows what made a nest inside of it, right? So some of our jobs just have to be on site. But we do have career ladders for those positions. When somebody comes in, we do an assessment to see where they are relative to the expectations for each level of our position. So if you're truly entry level, you're coming in at the base pay level. And as you gain your skills, we reassess, and outside of the annual review cycle, we will move you. I said it, so it's going to happen now, right? We've made lots of headway on that, getting out of that old pattern. But yeah, and even when we have CBA levels, we have senior levels, we have group lead opportunities, all of those are additional responsibilities. And then sometimes, if we have someone who really shows promise and it fits well with the need that we have, we might create a position just for them. And that's kind of the flexibility that you have as a smaller company. We're not tiny, but we have a lot more flexibility in how we do business than a large company with standardization and all of those things. And I've worked in both environments, and it's kind of nice to have some flexibility. And we really encourage people. We have a tuition reimbursement plan, so if they want to go pick up skills, we just ask for the grade. We want them to pass the class, and then they get reimbursed for it. And certainly if an employee had a problem with prepaying, we'd figure out a way to encourage them to continue their education, because we recognize that that additional education benefits them and it benefits us. And it benefits all of us because we're all employee owners.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I love that. I know we're kind of approaching the end of this webinar, so I want to move on to at least one other topic before we conclude today. And so the next topic we're going to be going on to is employee benefits and wellness trends. And so, Kristin, I'm going to start with you. How are you addressing mental health and well-being in that hybrid and remote workforce specifically?
Great. Thanks, Matt. This is definitely a topic that I am truly passionate about. So as far as addressing in this hybrid and remote, this could kind of go for on-site as well. I think what tends to happen is we place a lot of the job strictly on HR, right? HR is responsible for benefits. HR is responsible for health and wellness. And it is true that HR is responsible for the programs, developing the programs and extending that training out. But who really is responsible for the knowledge and for assisting in employees is your managers and your supervisors. And so the training of managers and supervisors in mental health and in this is going to have that domino effect into your employees. Something that I learned this year, and I may be behind in this, but I learned it in February, is about mental health first aid training. They call it MHFA, and I learned about it in a conference. These are trainings that you can provide to supervisors and managers. So similar to first aid training, like someone got cut or someone got a burn. This is a first aid training for mental health that is out there. I actually have a contact that does the training. And this is so that your supervisors and your managers can have, of course, they're not doctors, after this training, but they have that first level knowledge to be able to see, or to, this employee may be struggling with this or struggling with that. And it helps them to guide them in that situation. Now, as far as the remote and the hybrid, I recommend just so many check-ins, okay? And I know that many of employees that are remote, they like the idea that they're remote. Some people are introverts and they're like, I know what my job is. I don't really want to talk to anyone today. I just want to do my spreadsheets. these don't have to be like, hour-long Teams meetings. It doesn't have to be, oh, we need to be on the phone. Everyone, get ready. I need you visible. But to pick up the phone and have that daily check-in with someone, and I advise like supervisors and managers, and David, you touched on the leadership that I learned in the training, so I'm going to go with that. We were taught in the military, when you're a leader, you are providing support for your subordinates, okay? Picking up the phone saying, hey, employee, what do you need from me today? Is there anything that you need from me? Do you need any resources? Do you need any support? Is there anything that you need from me today so that you can do your job better? And when you call them and you go at it about that way, they're not feeling, oh, my boss is calling me and they need me to do. They are feeling, wow, my boss called me and asked what they could do for me, right? And in those daily check-ins, whether you do them daily, every other, weekly, you're going to learn your employees. You're going to learn your employees' emotions. You're going to learn your employees' attitudes. You're going to learn your employees how they work each day. And when you are sensing that something is off, when you're, I can't get a hold of this person, what's going on? And I've experienced this. The employees will start to open up if you have built that relationship. And so even when you have these employees not in front of you on a day-to-day basis, you are able to touch them in some kind of way, whether it be a chat, whether it be a text, a phone call, or a Teams meeting. And that is how we can address and continue to support our employees through mental health in all of these varieties of work situations, whether they're in the office with you, whether they come in just twice a week, or whether they're fully at home.
I love that. That's a great answer. Cindy, I'm gonna go to you on this one. How do you ensure that wellness programs cater to employees working in different locations with varying personal circumstances as well?
Sure. The short answer, do your research and then do experiments to see what resonates with employees. Now, of course, I have more detail than that, but for us, we made a push this year to expand our wellness offerings to employees. We put out there, if you get a well visit, we'll give you a gift card to Amazon. And why do we do that? I mean, they get it free through their health insurance anyway. Why do we give them a gift card? Because we want them to be healthy. And a lot of times, if you go in for your well checks, you can find out things that may start to be getting bad before they actually get bad, and you have better outcomes. And from a company standpoint, we're self-funded. We pay based on claims. We want people to have their well visits so that we don't have those big, large, expensive claims. So we designed it so it would be a win for both the employee and the company. We used to have a gym reimbursement. We widened it to a fitness reimbursement because we recognize that not everybody's comfortable going to a gym and working out in front of other people. So there are lots of great apps out there where you can get just as sweaty as you can in a gym and get good results. So we opened that up, and we recognize that not everybody has time to go to a gym, or they don't want to go to the gym and then take a shower and go to work and work all day. So we really wanted to come to where they were to kind of get rid of any excuses to say, I can't exercise or I can't improve my health and wellness. We've used lunch and learn sessions quite a bit, which I know everybody does lunch and learn sessions, but we have locations throughout the United States. So we pop them on a call. If they want to call in, if we're having it in our corporate office, employees can call in. We'll also record it. So if they want to watch it, on the weekend or something, they can do that. We make it accessible for them. We've had sessions on financial wellness. So including what's it like to be an ESOP member, what's, 401k information. Recently, we offered a session on managing aches and pains. Remember, our average age is 50, so there are plenty of aches and pains out there. So, we had a nurse practitioner and a massage therapist come in and give trigger point massage lessons. We videoed it, and I've had a number of people say, yeah, I watched that video. I had no idea, so great. Feel better so you can be active. This one really surprises me, but periodically we'll send communications out to employees about self-care, making time for yourself. That's not the part that really surprises me. The part that surprises me is most recently we did one and we said, just take time to have some fun, keep your mind sharp. We sent out word searches and word jumbles. You would not believe the number of employees who sent those in. Now, we said if you sent it in, you would be in a drawing for prizes, but they love it. It would never have crossed my mind, but we decided to do the experiment, and we know now we'll keep doing that because people participate. Finally, we found a really fun exercise / team building activity, and it's through an app called A Step Ahead. I don't know if any of you all have ever heard of that before, but basically it's a walking challenge. And I think they started out with zombie challenges. So you log into your app and a zombie's chasing you, and you have to walk so many steps a day. And you can be by yourself, you can be on a team, and you have team goals and individual goals, and you have to fight zombies along the way, and you earn power by walking, and your goal is to get to the safe house and ultimately defeat all the zombies so the world is saved or whatever, right? So we've done those 3 or 4 times this year, and employees love it. Now, we are doing experiments with that because our first iteration, we had teams and individuals competing in the same space, and the individuals just blew everybody else out of the water, and the teams were frustrated, right? So the second iteration, we said, okay, we are going to divide everybody up into teams, no individuals on this one. And we ran into other problems as a result of that one because people didn't tell me the truth when I asked how many steps per day they were going to take. They got competitive on me and started doubling what they were, so then the teams were out of whack again. But we did it another time, and we decided, we kind of noticed that some people weren't ready to kind of walk all the steps, maybe to the degree that their peers were. So we set up 3 separate challenges. It was the same challenge, but 3 different spaces. The try it out challenge, where it's like, I don't exercise a whole lot, but I think I'd like to walk some, and I really don't want the crazy intense pressure of these other competitive people who are going all out. So it was kind of their safe space to walk in. We had a second challenge group where we just said, you're going to hit your daily steps every day, whatever it is in the challenge. You might exceed them some days, and you're kind of competitive. And then we had the third group, which was, I'm in it to win it. I will do whatever it takes to win this challenge. So we really divided things out. We're going to have another experiment, though, because we found out some new things with that experiment. But what I want to tell you is, which, by the way, that was the creepy candy caper where we had 3 separate spaces where we fought witches and jack-o'-lanterns and skeletons. But what happened? We had 20 participants. They walked over 6 million steps during a 4-week challenge. That averaged out to 42 miles per week per person. It's crazy. We have competitive people at ComSonics, let me tell you. But it was fun. And in the app, you can message your team members to kind of spur them on and motivate them. You can also message everybody in the challenge. So, if you want to encourage someone who hasn't made it to the safe house, you can say, come on, team, you can do it. And, it's just a really fun space. And we're going to go for it in January. We're going to do the New Year's resolution food fight. Don't know what that means, but we're doing it.
Well, I'm excited to hear about it. That's awesome.
Screenshots.
I love it. I'm excited to see it. But no, and I love that you guys are trying things out as well. Trial and error there. That's great. I definitely will be able to find programs that best fit for the organization. So I love that. I'm going to go through one last question before we wrap things up today. So, David, the last one's for you on this same topic. So, want to get an idea of what emerging employee benefits or wellness programs have gained traction in your organization, or maybe organizations that you've worked with over the past few years that you see evolving the needs of the modern workforce.
Great question, and I'm not well versed in benefits, but I do see some of these things that have been starting to roll out, like pet insurance and other new offerings, and I think they're great. We're in the mindset that there are individuals who have different needs, and I think as employers continue to understand the diversity of their workforce, and that's not in the context that diversity is usually looked at, but that some people pets are very important in their life, and kids are very important in other lives. I think as we continue to go down that path, that's great. I do think this whole notion of flexibility and remote and all this, if you put it all together, it's time. And I think employers are going to have to start looking at time as being a benefit. That's either with paid time off or unlimited paid time off, or even rewarding employees who accomplish a significant task or project, rewarding them with time. I think we have to look at our mindset and think about, which benefits or wellness programs are going to gain traction that are more practical for our folks. And I think it's right in front of us. One of those things that's right in front of us again, and that's time. But that's what I'm seeing a lot of my employers starting to move towards, and being much more open and considering other things other than just traditional mindset around benefits.
Yeah, no, David, I love that. And I think that's a great question to end on as well, a great answer to end on, excuse me. But thank you for everyone who joined us today. Apologies for running a little bit over. Clearly, we are passionate about these items that we talked about today. But I hope that was all great information for all of you. Again, a reminder that we will send out the recording of this webinar to you after this call. And then any questions that have been put on the question box or question chat, we will send over answers to in an email following. But again, I appreciate everyone's time, and thanks for joining us today. And thank you to all of our experts here on the call, Kristin, David, and Cindy. I appreciate you all, and we hope you all have a great afternoon.
Thank you all.
Thanks.
Bye, thank you.